I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to John Meacham, you asked the Bushes a lot of questions, buddy, but you forgot the most important one.
I said if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you? I need to know.
And
Hell yeah, I would.
Baby killer.
we will see John Meacham here on Thursday. But for now, it's another episode of The Daily Carson Show with a cameo from the campaign managers for both Donald Trump and Ben Carson with interviews here. But so far, the press has now pried open the mystery box on Carson's violent childhood, a West Point scholarship offer, his high school biolab heroics, and a Yale psych course. All alleged and none proven to the satisfaction of the Ben Carson skeptics. It's been enough to move the good doctor's life of Rashomon from Twitter and cable news to the holy land of the big time broadcast network television.
Ben Carson is firing back at the media.
What happened to investigative reporting?
Fighting back, Ben Carson defends himself against criticism that he fabricated stories in his past.
Accused of embellishing stories about his violent youth and his time at college. Carson calls it a witch hunt.
On the eve of the fourth Republican presidential debate, Carson's credibility is now the biggest story in politics. So we're going to explore it from all angles tonight. First, John, is Ben Carson in better shape or worse shape today than he was headed into the weekend when this story started to explode?
There have been few questions that we've ever asked in the history of this show in over a year that I find easier to answer than this one. Worse, obviously worse. There are more questions, more stories, more scrutiny. It's gone to national broadcast television. As you say, the words liar, either with a question mark or an exclamation point, are now attached to Ben Carson's name in a way they weren't on Friday. Worse.
Wrong. He's in better shape. Most of these stories have burnt out. The bases are out around him. He's raising a ton of money. And if you go one by one, yes, long term, if there's some big things where he's caught lying, he's got a trouble with the truth, it could knock him out. But on none of these stories has he been caught lying. Not one of them.
And yet, you know the world of how our media works, that raising the question, asking the question, setting the bloodhounds on the trail, having everyone, and the more he taunts the press and says, this is a witch hunt, you all aren't doing your jobs, the more better reporters, more scrutiny, more digging.
Maybe I think find something else, but so far this thing is burning out. It was on the network news over the weekend, it was on network news this morning, but this thing for his supporters is burning out, and it's being painted successfully by Carson and his supporters.
Well, for his supporters.
Overreach. Well,
for his
to be
supporters.
the Republican nominee, which is the next goal that he has, this is a good thing.
Well,
lots of money, lots of circling the wagons. You've very few conservative voices now being critical of.
The question, though, is, as you know, is whether he can expand out from his current core of supporters into a broader. He does too.
Not to be the nominee.
He sure does. At some point, he's going to have to get more than 25% of the vote.
Well, sure, but not.
There's got to be.
Not in the short term, he doesn't.
Well, not in the short term.
Not to win too well in the early contest.
But I agree with that. But in the long term, look, I just think.
Do you think the next round of polls is going to show him dropping?
Maybe not, but I don't think it's going to show him rising. I don't think it's going to show him rising. I don't.
Well,
and again, he's got a debate now to deal with. He's going to be the target probably tomorrow night. I just don't see how you can say he's in a better position than he was. Maybe you could say
on Friday, because on Friday there was a firestorm over West Point.
He might be in a better position than he was yesterday, but he's not in a better position than he was on Friday.
Much better.
Okay. Carson, question number 2, and this is a short one. Based on the current facts, Mark, which of the panoply of Carson controversies or faux controversies do you think he's in the most trouble on, most vulnerable on?
I think, ironically, it's West Point, where I believe the story he's told is the most documented and clear, because that's the one that goes to credibility about a serious issue. Yeah. But he still hasn't shown why he thought, had he applied, he would have gotten in. He still hasn't shown that enough. All these other things about, did he shield people at his high school? What were the circumstances of a hoax involving a psychology course? All that stuff I just think is meaningless. And why a vegetarian was eating at Popeyes, this is not the stuff. This is a good
question, though. It is a good question.
This is not dodging the draft or Jennifer Flowers or
what you did in the Vietnam War.
It's all so trivial.
Yeah.
The West Point one, I think, could go a bad way. But the other stuff, I don't think it's any threat to him at all. That's not to say he wasn't careless with the facts, and it's not to say there might be something else uncovered. But if you talk to 12 people he went to high school with and they don't corroborate his story, it means nothing.
I just think it's all, to me, the whole problem here is that you can't pick one, that you have to consider them as a cumulative thing. I really can't. I mean, each one of them, I think, gives me a little bit of pause. Just like I think one unexplored area so far that hasn't gotten enough attention is this Manatech thing, where, he said on the debate stage last time he had no involvement with the company, and yet he did. There were on the company's website for a long time this nutritional supplement maker that claimed it could cure autism and cancer. He, Dr. Carson, was seen on the website doing what looked a lot like ads to people. There are a whole bunch of things that I think cumulatively raise the question of, does this guy, as you've used the phrase a million times now, trouble with the truth? Trouble with the truth is not what you want in a presidential candidate, and I think collectively it's more problematic than any individual story.
I agree that an unknown candidate is more susceptible to being damaged by these things because the negative information makes up a larger percentage of what voters
will know about him. And he's got no political career to look back on.
Sure, but if you go through everyone in this race practically and try to come up with cases where they've had trouble with the truth on serious policy issues, to me, as the Wall Street Journal editorial page said today, most of the criticism of Carson for this stuff amounts to carelessness, not lying. His real problem is issues. He needs to be clearer on issues, more specific on issues. That, to me, is where his undoing is going to be, not fly-specking his autobiography.
I'm fair. I'll tell you the one thing I think he's done that's totally unforgivable, though, which is on this Yale psychology, the fake exam thing. He blamed his co-author. Now, who would do that? Who would blame a co-author? I mean, if you ever did that to
a lazy co-author.
If you ever did that to me, I'd firebomb your apartment.
Really, a ghostwriter.
You can't blame your co-author.
Look, one of the things that happened today was they unearthed his mother being quoted regarding this thing we haven't talked much about, which is the question of whether his violent past using a knife. Extemporaneous or a contemporaneous quote
in Parade magazine.
Parade. So
1997. Right.
He's coming back on this stuff, I think. All right, up next, even more of the Daily Carson Show with appearances by Ben Carson's campaign manager, as we said, plus a visit from Mr. Trump's campaign manager. Back-to-back interviews when we come back. Synchronize your watches. 60 seconds upon our return.
Ben Carson says he's getting more media scrutiny than any presidential candidate, past or present. Barack Obama, Jeremiah Wright, and Bill Ayers might have something to say about that, but they aren't available for comment. Unfortunately for Carson, a lot of other people were available for comment. Here's a sampling, starting with the brightest minds in the cable news media punditocracy.
He doesn't know anything about policy. And his biography, he's lying, and the press has been cowering for months.
I'm still kicking over the pyramid.
The pyramid.
But let me just say, the story to me is that the media is somehow uncomfortable saying the guy lied about everything in his biography, and all he's got is his biography.
That's what happens when you're in first place. It's a good thing. If you're in first place, you're going to get more attention. You're going to get more scrutiny. That's what comes with the process.
If these stories continue to pile on, and they poke holes at this compelling story of redemption, it could hurt him in the long run with a sense of trustworthiness, because then it's all becoming about his personal character.
There is no such thing as bad press, and he's a very smart man. I mean, he's a man who does brain surgery, thousands of successful ones. So he knows how to turn something that is bad into something good.
So that is just the foundation in a multi-layered bean dip of criticism. Here's the second layer, which includes Carson's fellow Republican presidential candidates and also the White House press secretary, Joshua Earnest.
A couple of days of being asked about something that you put in your books, I got to tell you, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy. He should answer the questions forthrightly and directly. If he does, the American people will accept it. If he doesn't, then he's got a problem.
I'm not going to get into arguing what Ben did or didn't do, but the one thing I heard him say that I was kind of taken aback when he said that, people are looking into his personal life and they're going after him. I'm thinking, pal, you ain't seen nothing yet.
It's not easy to run for president. It shouldn't be. And that people, when they make public comments, are going to have their claims scrutinized, even if they're claims about their own biography. And that's part of the process.
And now, here comes the guacamole, the tireless, timeless frontrunner, Donald Trump, who said he wished his opponent the best and then twisted the proverbial knife past the belt buckle by describing Carson using a very specific phrase on all of the Sunday shows, or at least most of them. Now strain your ears, listen closely, and see if you can hear the key phrase.
I don't know where this all came from, but a book was written before he ran for politics. But he said he has pathological disease in the book. When you have pathological disease, that's a very serious problem because that's not something that's cured. That's something that you have to live with, and that's a very serious thing to have to live with. Stabbing somebody and, and saying you have when you have pathological disease, which he said, when he writes that he has pathological disease in a book. Now, he obviously wrote this book prior to thinking about running for office, I assume. But, he said he has pathological disease.
So you don't believe him? You don't believe him, do you?
Well, if you have pathological disease, that's a problem. I mean, he wrote it. I didn't write it.
So, Mark, I know you are a low energy person, but I still have to ask you the question. Do you think that string of attacks is doing Carson any damage? Start there.
I like the irony and hilarity of Trump saying he wrote it, when in fact that's not what Carson wrote in the book.
Yeah.
He misquoted the guy, claiming the guy gets things wrong. I think that, as I said before, I don't think he's being damaged. I think these candidates are making a mistake attacking Carson. This is one where if you think your opponent's really self-destructing, you should get out of the way.
Yeah, well, that's not Donald Trump's way. I actually should have said earlier, when you asked whether he was doing better now than he was last Friday, I should have said another reason why he's doing worse is that Trump's on him now, and Trump being after somebody is usually bad news for him. So let me ask the implication question to what you just said. If you don't think this is doing any damage to Carson, do you think that any of these people who are attacking him are risking backlash?
I think they could. I think if at the end Carson is wholly cleared, if not in the press at large or the political community at large, but amongst his supporters in the base of the Republican Party, I think people who are out there slapping at him now could be damaged.
Well, it's a little, it's hard. I think it applies differently to different people, right? It's hard to imagine what it is that Donald Trump would be vetted on now that would suddenly come back to harm Donald Trump. If there are other candidates out there, you'll notice that some of the other candidates, like people like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, not saying much about this right now.
There's two lines of criticism we heard there. One is the guy's claiming he's being over-scrutinized. It's ridiculous. Man up.
Right.
I don't think Carson's in danger of that because I think he's been fighting back so uncharacteristically aggressively.
Yeah.
I think his supporters think he's being unfairly criticized. The other question of does he have a trouble with the truth? I just don't think he does in a way that these candidates will benefit from it. We'll see.
Right. We will see. Coming up, we have not one, but two 2016 campaign managers on the same show, this here show, right here, right now, tonight. Corey Lewandowski of the Trump campaign and Barry Bennett of the Carson camp. We will ask them both what it's like at the top of the Republican field and how they're prepping their candidates for the big debate tomorrow night. After this.
A little earlier today, Donald Trump's campaign chief, Corey Lewandowski, left his Fifth Avenue headquarters, stopped by our set to talk about all things Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and about tomorrow's debate in Milwaukee. I started out by asking him how the campaign's going and whether he and his candidate were still enjoying the front-runner life.
It's fun because Mr. Trump has fun. He loves being on the road. He loves seeing people. He loves having big crowds. And we had the opportunity to do Saturday Night Live on Saturday night, and I think he had a great time, and so it's fun.
So neither the campaign manager nor the candidate at this point are feeling pressure, a little choke, nothing.
No,
all relaxed.
You know what I think? I think a lot of people have continuously underestimated him as a candidate. First, whether he's going to run, and then what impact he might have on the race. And I think people continue to underestimate him and his ability to not only be the nominee, but be the next president of the United States. So I don't mind that.
All right, let's talk about the Trump skeptics and two things they constantly bring up to me and to my colleagues. One, you guys went on radio last week, not television. Many of the other campaigns are on television. Do you guarantee that before New Year's Eve, Mr. Trump will have spent millions of dollars on paid television? Do you guarantee that?
I won't guarantee it, but I'll say this. I think we will have all the resources necessary to make sure that his message is out as wide as necessary. So radio is part of that plan. Television is part of that plan, of course.
Paid television ads.
Of course it is, but let's just keep in mind how much earned media he has received so far.
Right, but the Trump skeptics say he can get earned media whenever he wants. You guys are restrained. He could be leading the news every night if he wanted to, most nights. So they say Trump will just do more earned media, a little bit of radio, and never go on with paid ads.
Well, these are the same skeptics who said that he's never going to run for office. He'll never file his personal disclosure statements, that he won't have an impact in the race. So with all those pundits, I respectfully disagree.
So you may not spend money on television if you decide it's not worth it.
I think we'll make an investment like a business would to make sure that we have the best return.
That's only going to inflame the Trump skeptics. Let me ask you about ground game in Iowa and New Hampshire. Let's focus on those two. Tell people with metrics what the Trump campaign has built in those two states for people who are skeptical and say he's just running on big rallies?
Sure. So New Hampshire, my home state, 256 town chairmen in place, one in every single community, and many in more than just one. So while we have every single town covered, we also have multiple people in those towns. What we know in Iowa, we've got 1,800 people already lined up for all of the delegate locations. So when they come on caucus day, those people are going to know where to go. That's just the beginning. We're 84 days away from Iowa. We're continuing to build there. Our ground game is massive. We've got 1,000 endorsements, public endorsements in the state of New Hampshire already without trying. We don't go out and ask for endorsements of elected officials. These people are coming in because they understand.
Are you doing paid or volunteer calls to voters every night in those states?
Volunteers. We don't do any paid calls. These are volunteers. We have so many people.
How many calls a night are you making to
I think it varies per state, but I guess if you were to go into the Manchester, New Hampshire office on any given night, you'd have 20 to 25 volunteers making phone calls, getting people to commit to Donald Trump for president.
Okay, let's talk about Ben Carson, who is Mr. Trump's rival in national polls and most state polls. He is saying that he's being scrutinized more than anybody and more than anybody in this race and more than people in the past. Mike Huckabee said this morning about Dr. Carson, quote, "You ain't seen nothing yet." Chris Christie said he didn't have a lot of sympathy for Carson. Do you and Mr. Trump think that the scrutiny Carson getting is excessive or the norm?
Well, let me say on behalf of Mr. Trump, he has received an immense amount of scrutiny from business deals from 30, 40, and 50 years ago, as Dr. Carson has. That's part of the process when you decide you want to run for the highest office in the land and maybe the most powerful position in the world. And I think the scrutiny is fair. I think it gives people an opportunity to truly understand who a person is when they're running for office, not just what the paid component says, but what really takes place. And I think it's fair that Mike Huckabee has been through this, and Chris Christie, as a governor, has been through some of this, and Marco Rubio and many others, and they understand the scrutiny is very intense, much more so than maybe what Dr. Carson was used to in the private sector.
So true or false, Carson's right. He's getting more scrutiny than others.
No, he's not getting any more. He's not getting any less. When he has continued to do well in the polls, you see more scrutiny. I think you've seen that with other candidates. Mr. Trump has received an immense amount of scrutiny over the last 125 days since he announced he was going to run. And that's a fair thing to do because you're running for president. Hillary Clinton, as an example, has received an enormous amount of scrutiny, not just in her emails, but in her performance as a U.S. Senator, as the First Lady, and then Secretary of State. That's part of the job.
So what would you say to Carson about this?
I'd say if you want to be considered a top-tier candidate, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah. So over the weekend, Mr. Trump did Saturday Night Live, then on a few hours sleep, got up and did a bunch of Sunday shows by phone. And he kept saying he hopes all this works out for Dr. Carson, but he also used one phrase over and over. I want to play you one instance of his using it.
I guess a book was written. I don't know where this all came from, but a book was written before he ran for politics. But he said he has pathological disease in the book. When you have pathological disease, that's a very serious problem because that's not something that's cured. That's something that you have to live with, and that's a very serious thing to have to live with.
Now, talk about accuracy. The book doesn't say pathological disease. It says pathological temper. I'm wondering why it is if Mr. Trump wishes Dr. Carson well, he kept over and over talking about him having pathological disease.
Well, traditionally, if you think of someone who's a pathological liar, that means they lie all the time. And I'm not alluding to anything in general, but if you are self-identified as having a pathological problem, and then we look at some of the history that you have and some of the things that you've said may not be accurate, maybe that's what he was referring to in the book. I'm not sure.
Well, he said he had pathological temper. Not pathological lying.
Does that mean a good temper or a bad temper? What does a pathological temper refer to?
Well, I don't know. Your candidate said pathological disease. What was he referring to?
Well, I don't know. I don't speak for Mr. Trump, but I think if someone says they have a pathological problem, then that is something that people look at and say is a consistent problem, which takes place and doesn't end. And so, again, if someone is a pathological liar, most people would understand that means they lie all of the time. Right. They can't prevent themselves from lying.
You wish Dr. Carson the best, too. You hope this stuff doesn't hurt his campaign, just like Mr. Trump.
That's right.
So why would Mr. Trump, if he wishes him the best, talk about how horrible it is that he has pathological disease? Well, if I wish someone the best, I would just say, this stuff doesn't amount to anything. I'll leave it to others to decide.
Well, I think it's Dr. Carson's own words that he says he has a pathological problem.
Well, he didn't use his own words. He said pathological temper. So Mr. Trump used different words.
Well, temper, disease, I think maybe they're synonymous in some cases. I think if someone has a pathological temper, maybe that means they're overexposed too much, or maybe they have a very aggressive temper. That doesn't seem to be the case with Dr. Carson from what I've seen, but I do think what you've seen recently is some of the scrutiny because some of the statements that he has made may not be as truthful as he thought they were.
Did you know he was going to use that phrase before he got on the Sunday show?
I didn't know that.
Didn't know. So when he said it, how did you react? What did you think of that?
I support Mr. Trump, and I support the fact that he's called out Dr. Carson for things that he's written in his own book. And so when Dr. Carson had the opportunity to write something in his book that no one was going to question 20 years ago, he had the opportunity to set the narrative any way he wanted to.
Right.
He set a narrative which now, as you take a look on it in 2020 hindsight, may not have been completely accurate. If it was so accurate, we would see who these people are that have been potentially stabbed, or a mother who was almost hit in the head with a hammer, or other people from what CNN has said. They can't find anybody to confirm any of these things. Now, maybe they took place and maybe they happened, but I can tell you my childhood, growing up where I did, I think every person will remember me very well and what my childhood was like.
Knowing you've got a pretty good fingertip feel for politics, knowing what he's done so far, what he said, and the questions have been raised, you think this is going to end up being a small thing or a big thing in terms of his candidacy?
Well, I think people have true skepticism of the mainstream media, but I also think that when people look at Dr. Carson, the thing that they tend to publicly say is that his trustworthiness is why they support him the most, because it's not his job creation ability or his negotiating skills. He doesn't have any of those things. So they look at his trustworthiness. I think this goes right at the heart of his trustworthiness. And will people consider to say, we consider him to be the most trustworthy candidate if what we are finding he has said wasn't actually truthful?
So a big thing or a small thing in the arc of his candidacy?
I think it's a long time to see, but there's a long race to still go.
Okay. The big debate in Milwaukee, as you anticipate what the moderators might do, what the other candidates might do, who do you think is going to be the target in this debate?
Well, I think you have the two front runners, and clearly Mr. Trump, who has the comparative advantage when it comes to issues on economic importance. So whether it's trade deals or jobs or job creation or negotiation skills, if the moderators focus as they should, and as they said they would, on the economy, and I think Mr. Trump is clearly the person who they're going to talk to the most because he's created the most jobs, the most private sector jobs of anyone on the stage
and the richest.
Combined. And the richest, and hundreds of companies that he's put together. So if the moderators don't want to be part of the discussion after the debate is over, unlike the previous debate, then they'll talk to Mr. Trump and outline his vision for how to bring our economy back.
So this race, you got two guys who are heading the polls now, Trump and Carson, nationally and in the states. And yet the insiders, what I call the Gang of 500, they're now saying this is a two-person race, but it's between Cruz and Rubio. You are now a great student of the establishment and the anti-establishment outsider. How is it that it could be that the establishment's now saying it's a two-man race, but the two guys at the top aren't in the game?
Well, these are the same guys who said Jeb Bush was going to be the, coronation of Jeb Bush, and he was going to be the nominee, and he had $100 million, and he was unstoppable, and he had 100% name ID. But then when Donald Trump got in the race, they said, well, the only reason Trump is winning is because he has 100% name ID, as if the Bush family doesn't. So I think what you see is these inside pundits, guys like Bill Kristol, are wrong time and time and time again. They don't want to admit it because what they cannot do is they cannot control a Trump candidacy. They can't control a Trump presidency. They want to be able to buy and pay for these politicians who are all talk and no action. And they know it's the one thing with Donald Trump that they cannot do because he's self-funding his own campaign.
Carson's having trouble right now. Any trouble for the Trump campaign right now, or everything's going well?
Look, our job is to do the blocking and tackling of the campaign, which is making sure on the ballot, making sure that all the things that campaigns need to do to be successful are getting done.
But those are challenges and things you got to get done on your checklist. You got no problems right now?
We feel good about where we are.
Okay. Corey Lewandowski, campaign manager for Mr. Trump, thank you for coming to visit.
Thank you.
Again, our thanks to Mr. Lewandowski. And up next, the counter-argument, Mr. Barry Bennett, who campaign manages Carson campaign. And he'll join us after this word from our sponsors.
Dr. Ben Carson has been taking his lumps so far on the show, so let's bring in a man who can offer a rebuttal. Carson campaign manager Barry Bennett. He joins us now from Boynton Beach, Florida. Barry, good to have you. You've had a long weekend and into an early part of this week answering questions from the media. I just want to get your sense of whether, with Dr. Carson's credibility under assault from a variety of sources, do you think his credibility has been in any way damaged over the course of the last, say, 5 days?
I don't, because we've been very successful at pushing back on all the ridiculous charges that have been made. The West Point story, which has been rebuffed and at least partially retracted, although it should be fully retracted. The Yale thing was rebuffed a few minutes ago. And what was the other one? The violence thing. We found an article from his mother in '97 who told the story. Plus, there's a colleague at Johns Hopkins who told the story today as well. So, truth takes a little while to come out sometimes, but I think we rebuffed all those ridiculous charges.
So you think Americans who, as of a week ago, had no questions about whether Dr. Carson was a truthful person, you think today they still have no questions about whether he's a truthful person?
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand the Republican base, right? I mean, being attacked by the media is an instant rallying cry, which is why we've added 160,000 new Facebook followers the last week, and we've raised $4.5–5 million.
Barry, some of your supporters, and I didn't even include you in this, have said, some of the phrasing could have been more precise. This is the kind of scrutiny presidential candidates get. Has any of this, I know you think some of the stories have been accurate, and I've come to agree with you about some of them, and certainly in some cases unfair and inaccurate. But do you all now understand or feel that this is an appropriate level of scrutiny, or do you agree with your candidate that he's being over-scrutinized?
No, the scrutiny part doesn't scare me at all. We're prepared for scrutiny. But I'm particularly disturbed at scrutiny with an axe to grind. It's not, in this country, guilty until proven innocent. And some of these reporters have just, frankly, done almost no research. I mean, no one called the Yale record to see if they would corroborate the story. They did today. No one Googled Mrs. Carson to see if she ever told the story in Parade magazine. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, there are a lot of journalists out there who are really good, hardworking folks, but there are also some that are lazy and they have a bent before they start writing.
Barry, let me ask you about a question that is that hasn't been part of this last 5 days, but that did come up earlier. It came up in the last debate. Dr. Carson was asked about his involvement with this company called Manitech, which is a company that makes nutritional supplements. He said on the debate stage that he had no involvement. He said, I didn't have any involvement with them. He later said, it's absurd, it's propaganda, and he said, I did not have any kind of relationship with them. Obviously, there are videos that exist of Dr. Carson that many people look at and seem like that look a lot like ads to people, where he's touting the virtues of the supplements made by this company. How do you square those two things, the existence of those videos and his claim that he had no involvement with the company?
Well, here's a perfect example. If anyone would have bothered to call Manitech, they would have said there's no involvement, no contractual relationship, none whatsoever. He gave a couple paid speeches, which is what he did for a living for the last 4 or 5 years, and he got a speaking fee. He spoke to all kinds of groups. Does he have some kind of contractual relationship with all of them? Of course not. It's ridiculous. He takes a vitamin that comes from Manitech. He still does. He actually thinks it makes him healthier. Good for him. But I mean, he doesn't run the company. He doesn't make any of the false advertising claims that they had. And it's ridiculous.
So Barry, I take
if this is all they got, though, they're welcome to make it.
I take your point that there was no contractual relationship, and I take your point that he didn't run the company. But you're saying that he was unaware that videos of him touting the products were being used on the company's website?
Not only that, but the speaking contracts prohibit them.
Okay.
So you're a student of Mr. Trump, and in the world of polls, at least, there's a two-person.
Aren't we all?
There's a two-person race. So over the weekend, a lot of interviews, Mr. Trump said, "Oh, I wish Dr. Carson the best. I hope nothing bad happens." But then he repeatedly misquoted the book, Dr. Carson's book, and said that Dr. Carson had confessed to pathological disease, rather than what Dr. Carson wrote, which is pathological temper. What do you think of Mr. Trump's using the phrase pathological disease?
I don't think he knows what it means, to tell you the truth. I mean, you never know with Donald. It's either, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. He's either your best friend or your scum. And all I know for sure is he's really, really rich.
Well, in this interview, he seemed to be both. He was saying he wishes the best for Dr. Carson, but he says a pathological disease. Other, as you know, elite Republicans, as well as some of the rivals for Dr. Carson, have long said that this would be his undoing, that he has a trouble with the truth. Within your campaign, do you all see that argument at all as a vulnerability? Or you think, as you just said, if this is what people are going to come after him on, he's going to be the nominee?
Look at it from 30,000 feet. Dr. Carson wrote a book 25 years ago about occurrences that occurred 25 years before that. And he told the entire world about his warts. Okay? Now, CNN has run around Detroit trying to write a story that, see, he has no warts. Why would this is ridiculous.
Barry, let me ask you this question. We talked to Armstrong Williams about this on Friday. Do you feel as though, in terms of doing self-opposition research, which a lot of campaigns do when they head into a presidential campaign, do you feel as though you were adequately prepared for these kind of questions when they started coming? And to what extent have you done more work in the course of the last few days to try to prepare for other questions that might be coming down the line?
Well, I mean, I know of the existence of the opposition research book that one of our opponents put together. I know they've shared it with another candidate. Reporters tell me all kinds of things. But, we're not going to waste a lot of time worrying about it because he's a man of integrity. He's a man, a great life story. And, everything that they say can be rebutted. And if it takes us a couple days, we're fine with that.
So, Barrett, you didn't quite answer my question. I mean, did you guys go through the books prior to when the questions came? Had you gone through the books and researched any of this stuff so you would be able to have responses at hand, or are you just doing this kind of on the fly?
No, we went through the books, but I mean, I didn't waste a lot of time building a file cabinet full of responses in case, somebody wakes up with an attack. That's ridiculous. We're focused on fundraising. We're focused on putting our army out there. We raised $4 million last week, and this morning when they went to the post office, there were 20,000 envelopes with checks in them. I mean, that's $1 million day. We're doing just fine.
Barry, America's getting to know you. That's one of the fringe benefits of the scrutiny for Dr. Carson. But people probably don't know that while you're managing this insurgent campaign now, you've worked for Rob Portman and other people who would be considered part of the establishment of the party. The establishment now is saying it's a two-man race. But they say the two men are not the two national and key state frontrunners, Carson and Trump. They say it's a two-man race between Cruz and Rubio. What do you think of the establishment's view?
I think they probably need to get out of the grill room of the Capitol Hill Club and go out and see America. I don't think they get what's going on.
Do you think right now it is a two-man race between Carson and Trump?
Well, I mean, collectively, I think we're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 55, 58% of the vote. If this race settles in after the debate tomorrow night, through the holidays, then it's going to be really hard for anything to happen to make it change.
Let me just follow up on that a little bit, Barry. Ted Cruz is obviously the one who thinks that he's going to benefit from what he sees and his people see as the inevitable collapse of Dr. Carson and Donald Trump. Right. If you were having a private operatives conversation with them, you would say what?
I would say you really need to go out and do some more research because, look. We don't have billionaire fundraisers that you can offend with a Wall Street Journal story. Right? We have multi-thousandaires. Those are our donors. We have 900,000 donations now. We're going to be here for the long haul. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be in Cleveland, and we're going to go there with a lot of delegates.
Barry, preview the debate tomorrow night for us. Are you expecting Dr. Carson to face the brunt of the scrutiny and the attacks such as they are?
Well, we got to prepare for that. We'll see what happens. I mean, last time everyone thought Trump was going to be very aggressive, and he wasn't. So we'll see what happens. But we're prepared. Going back to these, the inside the Beltway punditry class, I mean, these all people 6 months ago said this election was over, that it was Jeb Bush's. So why would we think that they suddenly became intelligent?
Our thanks to Barry Bennett, a.k.a. B-Ben. Up next, Jay Mart from the New York Times. After this.
We mentioned it earlier in the show. Ye olde political establishment has now determined that this is a two-man race to be the Republican presidential nominee. A lot of people we talked to says it's going to come down in the end to two 44-year-old Cuban-American first-term senators, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Rubio had a good weekend after the release of his Florida GOP charge card statements showed that there was, in the view of most people, no big there. And the Cruz campaigned in Iowa over the weekend, and he worked to solidify his status as the darling of certain quarters of the right. Here to talk to us about why the establishment is thinking Cruz-Rubio rather than Trump-Carson is the New York Times' Jonathan Martin. Jonathan, I'm assuming you agree that at least some people you talk to, that we talk to, are saying this is going to come down to Cruz-Rubio. Where did that materialize all of a sudden?
Oh, I think by process of elimination.
Yeah.
I think just in looking at this race, and by the way, not last week or even the week before that, I think a lot of folks looking at this race a while back, seeing Walker drop out, seeing Jeb's struggles, and you just sort of go through it, and I think a lot of those people are coming to the conclusion that Trump and Carson are not going to ultimately prove viable once votes are cast. And who does that leave you? Well, it leaves you Kasich and Christie, who are running basically New Hampshire-focused campaigns where it's make or break. And so if they don't win there, then what are you left with? Well, you're left with Rubio, Cruz, and there's not many other possible candidates beyond that. Look, when folks ask me about this, I say, look, it's certainly possible. I can see it unfolding that way. But guys, this campaign has proven every certitude to be either wrong or at least misinformed.
What do you think, Jonathan? What do you think we hear it all the time. We've discussed it a million times that Trump and Carson will not be the nominees. You just said it yourself. It's a presumption for the scenario Mark just laid out. What's the process? What's the process by which the two frontrunners, who've been the two frontrunners for quite some time now, what's the process by which they fade away?
I think reporting about, it's certainly in the case of Carson, about who he is, and I think also when it comes to Trump, voters taking a closer look at who they actually want to make commander-in-chief before they go to the polls and deciding that he's not up to that. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but that's the scenario in which you can see it unfolding. And also, I would note that the polling this cycle has been sort of harder and harder, because as you guys know, polling in general is harder and harder to do. And this is sort of in the weeds, but your smart viewers will get it, that Trump does better on so-called robo-polls than he does live caller polls.
Yeah, we've talked about that here.
Yeah, so it's a sort of fascinating scenario where folks are willing to admit that they'll pull the sort of lever for Trump when they're talking to a robot, but not a real person. It's fascinating.
So let's talk about Rubio. The thing we talk about all the time is what early state can he win? For a while, I was deeply skeptical because he didn't seem to be doing well in any of the first four states. But if he wins the establishment lane in Iowa, can he then finish first in New Hampshire, even though right now he's at best third in New Hampshire and pretty far off the leader?
It's a great question, and sort of one of the most fascinating subplots of this campaign is, can Rubio get to the point that he either wins Iowa or comes out as the establishment favorite by being second or third in Iowa, and go into New Hampshire and sort of leverage that to become the candidate to beat in New Hampshire? I think it depends on a couple of things. Number one, is New Hampshire going to listen to Iowa? As you guys know, there's a tradition of New Hampshire doing the opposite of what Iowa does. Secondly, that scenario also assumes that Jeb, Kasich, and Christie, who, as I wrote about today in the paper, have been spending a lot of time in New Hampshire, are not going to be able to have a sort of hold on the electorate in New Hampshire that can sustain Rubio coming out of Iowa strong.
I know we're in a cycle where we're going to expect to see some additional firsts, but at this point, I don't think Rubio is going to be first in any poll in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, or Nevada before the Iowa starts to vote. I don't think anybody's ever been the nominee of their party or won one of those states without being first at some point in a poll, right?
I think it's possible that he's not first in any of those polls, but this race can change so quickly. Right. We have the debate tomorrow night. We have the debate in December. And then we have a debate in January. So if Rubio has three really strong debates and he gets more mo off of that, and the other candidates have problems, I think it's possible, Mark, that Rubio could lead in one of those states, or perhaps
which one? Which one?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Yeah, I think that's true. But I think that's possible too. I think it's not likely, but I mean not unpredictable, but January is going to be, I think, a month. Mark, I'm speaking to you now. Yeah. I think January is a month where you could see a lot of movement and a lot of polling. Like we get through this holiday season, we get that whole month of January. We haven't had that before. The month of January leading into Iowa and New Hampshire. Previous cycles have been much earlier. You know, that month could see, I think, a lot of tumult. The question I have for J Mart is this question, which is part of the Rubio scenario. Yeah. Coming out of that last debate, there were a lot of people, including this reporter, who wrote about the perception that Jeb was dead. Jeb Bush, dead, done, finished, more or less. Have you seen any signs since the CNBC debate in Boulder, Jonathan, that makes you think that there's a pulse there, or anything like a pulse that could suggest a possible or imminent comeback?
I spent time with him last week in New Hampshire, and I think the answer to that question depends upon whether or not investment and time in a place like New Hampshire still matters. Not to plug my story once again here for a second time, but it partially depends upon whether or not he can work his tail off in New Hampshire and get a hearing from folks there that is based upon his pitch to them, not based upon whether he does or does not perform in debates. That may not be plausible given the way campaigns are now conducted, but I think that's his scenario in terms of trying to find a comeback path.
John, I'm gonna ask you a two-part question. The first part is that a lava lamp behind you or a police siren? What is that thing behind you? Any idea?
That is a scoop siren. I think we hit that when we have scoops. I think it's Michael S. Schmidt's siren.
That's a nice office accoutrement. My second question is, we talked about a lot of the candidates are kind of in play here. If it came down to a Cruz-Rubio final, how would you handicap that? If those two guys, say, emerged from South Carolina as the two viable candidates, how would you handicap that race?
It'd be a barn burner because Cruz would be able to do what a lot of conservative candidates haven't done in past campaigns, which is coalesce the right pretty quick after the first stage vote.
With money.
Look, most conservative candidates have a hard time coalescing the vote, and they're not able to do so, if they are at all, until later in the campaign. If Cruz can do that within the February window, that would be very significant. And Rubio, oh my gosh, there'd be a flood of establishment money and support to him because folks would want to stop Ted. You know, hey guys, one fast point that John mentioned earlier that got me thinking. It's important for viewers to know that there's a distinction between the polling when it comes to primary races and polling in general elections. And the polling in primary races is so volatile in part because the voters are not deciding necessarily based upon their ideological worldview. It's much more of a personal, and at times it can be a sort of fickle decision. I kind of like so-and-so. Oh, he's better today. Oh, he's great. And that can kind of move over time if there's not big ideological differences, if it's more of a personal decision. And it is different in primaries, and it moves faster than it does in generals.
Yep, lots of shifts could be coming. Jay Mart, thanks very much. Jonathan Martin of the New York Times. We'll see you in Milwaukee tomorrow. When we come back...
That is why I think January is going to be wild.
Wild January. When we come back, your campaign weather forecast. Political thunderstorms are a-brewing. We'll tell you where and how to dress for it. Back in 60 seconds.
Oh, tomorrow is going to be another exciting day out there in election land. So let's go live right now to our 24-hour campaign forecast center, where our chief political meteorologist, Alex Trowbridge, is standing by. Tro, where's all the action tomorrow?
John, we're talking about Sin City, baby. Specifically the Wisconsin city of Milwaukee, where all the Republican candidates are going to be crashing in for the debate. Take a look at this confluence. Over in the east, it's Christie, Huckabee, Carson, and Jim for you Gilmore heads. Over in the Midwest, we've got Rand, Rubio, Bush, Kasich, Santorum, and Trump, all coming together for the brouhaha in Brewtown. An exciting phenomenon we see a lot of every 4 years. FYI, Clinton, she's going to be staying far away from the rumble over in Derry, New Hampshire, talking with veterans before moving over to Dartmouth for a government speaker series. That's it for me. Remember, like a Poncho or Jonathan Martin on Granite State Glad Handing, we have got you covered. Back to you.
Right. That guy's getting a little less weird as we get further into this. You're going to Milwaukee tomorrow. I, alas, am not. So what are you going to be looking for in the
moderators, the Fox Business moderators have said they're going to focus on business, finance, economy. And it's going to be fascinating to see. The answers are longer than in some of the previous debates. The rebuttals are longer. It's going to be interesting to see if they really stay true to that and there's an actual debate about economic issues, who can shine there. I think everyone, all 8 of them on that main stage, think they can.
Yeah, I think that's right. But you know what's going to be interesting, of course, in this context is that I often think that the complaints about debates and debate moderators are all just trumped up, you know, especially in the Republican world where attacking the media makes sense. I wonder how many of the candidates asked serious questions about the economy are going to just turn those questions and use them to attack people like Ben Carson.
A little bit harder because it's Fox this time.
Yeah, it's true. I agree. All right, we'll be right back with some very exciting Paul Ryan news after this. This here television program is on the tube twice a day at 5 and 8 p.m. ET. but we are live 24/7 on BloombergPolitics.com. When you visit that site, make sure you check out our campaign tracker for the latest 2016 updates, along with Will Leach's takedown of Donald Trump's performance over the weekend on Saturday Night Live.
Tomorrow we hit the road. We take the show to Milwaukee for the Republican presidential debate, where we will have a live interview with the new Speaker of the House on his home turf, Paul Ryan.
What are you going to ask that guy?
I'm going to ask him about nutrition. I don't know. We'll see you tomorrow. Paul Ryan, debate preview. We'll see you tomorrow night, 5 Eastern time. Until then, thanks for watching. Sayonara.